Welcome to Charter California Edition. My name is Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Robert Garcia. He is a member of the Long Beach City Council, also a leading candidate for mayor. That election will be held in April?
April and then June.
April, June. We know there are several candidates in the race, so if a candidate gets 50% plus one, they win outright, but we'll see what happens there.
Right.
Before we talk about that race, sir, I want to speak with you about the budget of Long Beach. Fascinating. Because Long Beach faced deficits for many years, a lot of just gut-wrenching cuts to police, to prosecutors, yet like California, surpluses all of a sudden. What happened?
Sure. I mean, I think it's important first to take a little historical perspective on it. So, I came in office about 5 years ago, and at the time I was coming into office, not as you know, the state, the country going through a massive recession. Very difficult time. The city at the time had about a $40 million budget deficit.
And how high was that in terms of percentages?
Oh, I mean, it's pretty high. I mean, for a city of our size,
right.
I mean, a $40 million challenge is a big challenge.
Okay.
And what was interesting about it, of course, is that we were seeing the effects, of course, that every city was seeing. And on top of that, quite frankly, we had done, prior councils had made some mistakes about some pension spiking and some other things that did not put us in a good fiscal position. Like a lot of cities, when the times were good, we overspent and overpromised. So we were in a tough situation. You certainly never get into running for office to cut jobs and cut programs. But we had to take a very serious look at government and the way it was structured. And I think that, that first year we were at 40 million. And then every year after that, we just kept cutting it until, for the first time in many years, this year, Long Beach now has a budget surplus, which is significant.
Right.
And we're able to achieve that through a variety of ways.
And it begs the question when you look at surpluses, because all of a sudden you have extra cash. What do you do with that cash? Do you spend it? Do you put it in a rainy day fund? Do you pay down debt to the extent you have debt? If your pension obligations are oversubscribed, do you pay down some of those pension obligations?
Well, I think we did a little of all of that.
Okay.
So what we first did is we looked at the government system. We essentially made the government a little bit leaner.
Right. You could also cut taxes.
Exactly. Essentially more efficient. We made government more efficient. And then when we got the surplus in, part of that was also through pension reform. And so we were really the first city in the state to achieve essentially major pension reform with every single employee group.
Took a while.
It took a while. It took us 3 years.
Right.
But we did it at the bargaining table, working with our employees, not against them, which I think is really important. And so now we have the surplus. Now we have our pension costs, which is lower. And what we're doing, which I think was the fiscally responsible thing to do, is we first took the money that we had as far as in addition to the budget, and we put aside money for a rainy day fund.
You did.
We have reserves, but what we did is we increased the amount in the reserves and put money aside into reserves. We also took some money and are beginning to look at our unfunded pension liability cost. Then we took other monies, particularly one-time money that was coming in from oil extraction and other things. And we did the smart thing. Not everyone wanted to do this, and quite frankly, some of us were criticized for kind of sticking to the line on this, but we spent the money not on ongoing programs and on ongoing expenses, but on one-time expenses. So we invested it where we were going to get the biggest bang for our buck, which is infrastructure. So when you invest, $1 in infrastructure, you're essentially making an investment in the long-term strength of that street, because at the end of the day, it's not going to cost you that much more to fix down the road. And so if you maintain your streets in a better condition, they're not going to be as costly for you down the road. We got a lot of people, kind of screaming at us to, do this or put more personnel on the street or more police or more of that. We did some of that, but we didn't overspend. I think we were cautious. I think we did the right fiscal thing to do, and now we have surpluses. Now we're having back-to-back police academies. Now we have a fire academy that's graduating, and all of this is because we tightened the belt and did the right thing.
What about cutting taxes?
Well, as you know, in Long Beach, the tax structure is not completely in the city's hands. We're looking right now and reviewing. You can call them taxes, fees, and other things that are out there, and how we restructure those. But I think the important thing is that during this time of economic downturn, we didn't go out to the voters and ask them for more.
I understand.
And a lot of cities went out and said, "Give us more taxes, put out a bond." The city did not do that, and I think we're really proud of that.
I want to talk about what you're hearing from your constituents, your voters, in the context of the budget And especially since you are now actively running for mayor.
Sure.
Because you are speaking to folks throughout this great city, almost 500,000 people, not just your one council district. And so what are they saying to you about the better times, how they want to see surplus spent, or any other issues for that matter, sir?
Well, I think first of all, the most important thing that everybody really wants is for the city to succeed. And I think most people feel actually really good about the direction of Long Beach. If you ask voters, how do you feel about the direction of your city? You get a great response. I mean, most people feel Long Beach is going in the right direction. And I think that is because of sound fiscal policy, and it's because of the investments that we've made have been the right investment. I think beyond that, people, what I hear from people is people want to make sure that we're continuing strong fiscal policy, but that we're also growing. It's important that we grow the city in the right way. It's important that we invest in getting business to come to the city. Let
me ask you if I may.
Yeah.
One of the huge growth drivers in this city, the Port of Long Beach, and we'll be talking about this later on in the program as well with Gary DeLong and the acting deputy executive director. It's a tremendous catalytic engine, yet while the port is growing, there's always concerns about green growth. Right. And we know about Asthma Alley, we know about some other areas. So talk to me about that and what your voters are saying.
Sure. Well, I think first of all, the Port of Long Beach and the Port of Los Angeles,
right, of course,
as a combined port. I mean, that's the economic engine of America. I mean, you have more regional jobs that are created out of that, particularly the impact it has on Long Beach, on trade, logistics, all the different industries that come out of that. So to ensure its growth is extremely important. We cannot, as a city, sit around and play maintenance at the Port of Long Beach. We've got to be aggressive in its growth, because at the end of the day, we have challenges just on the horizon. We have the challenge of the Panama Canal. We have the challenge of what's happening in South America. We have the challenge of other ports. And so if we're going to continue to lead as the center of commerce at the Pacific Rim, we've got to be aggressive when it comes to, one, keeping the business that's at the port in place, and two, growing the port in a responsible, green way that allows to attract new business, particularly from across the ocean. And I think that we can't sit around for the next few years and just hope that business comes to Long Beach. We've got to be out in Beijing, we've got to be out in Rio, we've got to be out in these places and bring business in.
There's no doubt that this port, the Port of Long Beach, is active, doing as much as it can to grow the business. The Middle Harbor Project, refurbishing the Desmond Bridge. Undeniable that this is a well-run machine, despite some issues with the port commissioners, which we won't talk about later on in our program. But again, I do want to focus on this green element. I mean, you know, the LA Times, not the Long Beach Press-Telegram, not the Long Beach Register, the LA Times has been covering this question of Asthma Alley. And, you know, it's disturbing. Yes, the port has done a lot on the question of greening, plugging in, and, but there's still those. And do you represent the area that's
absolutely? I mean, listen. The reality is that we have some of the worst conditions for asthma in the entire state.
Right.
I mean, just right up and down the 710 freeway.
Exactly. Terminal Island Freeway.
Absolutely,
right.
It is a huge challenge for us. And but I will say that there's no question that we're going in the right direction there, because all the new growth is growth that's happening with new technology and green systems. In addition to that, you look at the emissions in the air. The air up and around the Port of Long Beach, the emissions level, particulate matter, has dropped by 85%
I know
just in the
true.
last 4 or 5 years. And so we're actually seeing incredible change in air quality, in water quality, quite frankly, and in a lot of other measurements. So I think the port is doing the right thing. Can we do better? Absolutely. Do we have a responsibility to also help, particularly young kids and families up and down the corridor?
Right.
I mean, who knows why in the past we built schools along the 710? I mean, that's a discussion for another day.
And it will, because you're going to come back, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, his name is Robert Garcia. He is a member of the Long Beach City Council. He is a candidate for mayor of Long Beach election in April. I'm Brad Pomerance. It's Charter California Edition. We'll be back with Gary DeLong, member of the Long Beach City Council. Charter California Edition, I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Gary DeLong, he is a member of the Long Beach City Council. And so I want to speak out Long Beach and one of its most important critical drivers, and that is the Long Beach port.
Correct.
So many folks may not realize how critical the Long Beach port, its twin, the Los Angeles port, how critical those two engines are to the entire California economy. Give us a sense, sir.
Well, and you're correct. It's certainly the city of Long Beach's largest economic engine, but yes, it's a regional engine.
It's massive.
It's massive. Several $billion a year of jobs are associated with the Long Beach port.
1 in 8 jobs in Long Beach are tied directly to the port.
That's correct. Not so it's working at the port, but in an ancillary industry.
That's how critical it is. And if you think about Southern California, God, it's even greater. And one could say over 1.5 million jobs are tied to the port nationally.
Yes, and not only jobs, but it's the linchpin to the whole goods movement industry of Southern California. So if you go to a store and you buy something, chances are it came through the Port of Long Beach. Or the Port of Los Angeles.
Sure, and I know that the competition for port traffic is fierce.
It's getting fiercer.
Even more fierce.
That's right.
And we know that our friends in Panama are doing everything they can to try to siphon off traffic from the Long Beach port. But the Long Beach port is not taking it. They are fighting back. And while the Panama port is engaged in its development, we have the Middle Harbor project here in Long Beach. It's hard to underestimate the impact of this project.
It is. In fact, we have over at the Port of Long Beach several $1 billion of projects over the next decade or so. Billion. That's how much infrastructure improvements are going on in the port. From the Middle Harbor project, the new terminals will be there, as you mentioned. Also putting in a new Gerald Desmond Bridge, which is a $1 billion project.
And let's talk about that bridge because it's iconic.
It is.
It is really, when you look at it, and in fact, if I may, the front page of the California section of the LA Times had a beautiful picture of the Gerald Desmond Bridge recently. And so I want to get a sense about that and its rehabilitation, because that is one project that's, there's some consternation surrounding it. When's it going to get done? What's happening? Tell us about that.
Well, first of all, if you think the existing structure is iconic, you should see the new design.
Really?
It will be a very beautiful bridge by the time it's done. It's going to be gorgeous.
But when's it going to be done?
Well, in the next couple of years, right? They're working on it night and day.
And
currently.
They is who?
They are the contractors who've been hired by the Port of Long Beach.
And that's the key, is that the port really plays a part in the redevelopment of infrastructure.
It does.
In our region.
A huge player in that. But there's also some state and federal funding as well. So it is a partnership with government entities. And there's really 2 reasons that it's happening. First of all, the existing bridge is falling apart. We have what's known as diapers on it to keep the concrete chunks.
I like that.
Keep the concrete chunks from falling off the bridge. It catches it. And secondly, the new bridge will be taller. And container ships are getting larger and larger and larger, so they need more space to fit underneath the bridge. I
know that over the last decade, tremendous, valiant efforts have been made to, let's call it, green the port.
Amazing.
And when I think about plug-in as opposed to idling.
That's right, cold ironing, so you actually plug into electrical power and you're not idling your auxiliary diesel engines and putting pollution in the air.
And I know that the trucks that have come in and out of the port.
And a clean truck program, driving that to reduce the emissions. At
the same time, there still continues to be an issue, and I know you may not want to talk about it, but it's important. It's the question of what we know as Asthma Alley.
Yes.
Where a portion outside of your district, if I may say, children are impacted by asthma.
Yeah, and the west side of Long Beach, that's correct.
So when I asked you about that, I don't want to ignore the efforts that have been made by the port, because they really have been dramatic. But at the same time, folks are still being impacted. What can you tell us about those issues?
Sure, well, a couple of things. First of all, we've had an 80% reduction in emissions as comparative over the last decade. It is amazing the reduction in pollution impacts generated by the Port of Long Beach.
And I thank you for that.
But as you say, you can't just pat yourself on the back. We actually need to do more. And we're going to continue to do more. We're looking at zero emission technology. We're going to continue to raise the standards and raise the bar every year, so that it needs to drive its emissions down until they're very little. And as you mentioned, there's still that problem on the west side. It needs to be fixed.
And part of the issue is the west side, it lacks green space.
It does.
And so is that something that needs to be evaluated?
It does. Well, it needs to be evaluated. We need to make appropriate investments in the city. In fact, if you look at over the last 20 years, I'll say over 90% of the dollars that we expend in creating new parks in the city are on the west side.
Okay.
Like I represent the east side.
Sure.
Right? We haven't added any
Yeah,
parks on the east
right.
side.
You're not
New
park
parks,
poor.
they need to be in central Long Beach, they need to be in West Long Beach. That's where the investments need to be made, and we'll continue to make those.
I want to talk about, there's no really other way to say it, the power center that is the port.
Yes.
And it is literally focused upon what is known as the port commissioners.
Correct. There's
Not
five port commissioners.
5 port commissioners, not uncommon. Los Angeles has port commissioners.
Yes.
I think it's fair to say that those appointments are plum jobs, and I don't say that pejoratively by any sense.
But they're also a lot of work.
They're a lot of work.
High prestige, but a tremendous amount of work.
A lot of work, but when you look at the Long Beach port, we have seen a bit of turnover lately.
And some turmoil, honestly.
And some turmoil. And so we've talked about it on this program. Your president, or now former president, was deposed, essentially.
He was removed from that post.
He was removed
Correct.
from that post. And this was a man who was fairly well respected in the community. But there were some questions about whether he engaged in travel in an appropriate manner. He is now gone. Simultaneously, almost simultaneously, someone else resigned. So within 2 days, you had 2 vacancies on a board of 5.
We did.
What happened?
And candidly, not uncommon. In fact, as Mayor Garcia came into office in Los Angeles, has replaced a couple of the port commissioners. But there has been turmoil.
But what's different is we don't have a new mayor yet in Long Beach. So
That's
this is
correct.
kind of in the middle of a
Yes,
mayoral
indeed.
term. We have 2 vacancies.
We did.
1 voluntary, 1 not.
That's right.
So what happened?
Well, what happened was the mayor, who appoints the port commissioners, felt that he had lost the ability to collaborate and work with the president of the port. And at the council, we agree with the mayor. We think that's a very important relationship. We don't always agree on everything, but we need to be on the same page, and we need to be working in a collaborative manner. So the president was removed.
But what's interesting is, and is this procedural, the mayor requested his removal and the city council needs to accede to that request?
That's correct. The city council needs to approve it just as appointments are done. The mayor appoints,
I
and
understand.
then the city council confirms. The mayor removes, but the city council needs a 2/3 majority to support the recommendation.
And that happened.
And that did happen.
Okay, so Thomas Fields was removed from
That's
his
correct.
position. Is it coincidental that 2 days later another commissioner stepped down?
I don't want to say it's coincidental, but it's not 100% related either. There's been a lot of turmoil in the
Right.
port, as you mentioned, and I think Mr. Ceramic looked at that and said, you know, I'm ready to move on. I spent over 6 years in the port. He's accomplished a lot of great things. He's ready to move on to a new challenge and create an opening. But I would tell you, looking forward, I've never been more optimistic about the future of the Port of Long Beach and the Board of Harbor Commissioners. You look at the meeting that happened earlier this week, they went through an agenda, they got a lot of good business done. Sure, there were some disagreements, but they were done in a very professional, respectful manner.
And as we speak today, Mr. Ceramic's successor had been named.
That's correct.
And who is that person?
That's Lori Ann Farrell.
Okay.
She's a former director of finance for the city. She left the city a few years ago. She lives in Long Beach, and she's going to be a tremendous addition to the port. Both her knowledge of the city, her deep financial background, she's going to do a terrific job.
At the same time, we know that the presidency remains open as we speak today.
It does.
What does that do for the port, the Board of Harbor Commissioners? I mean, to have a presidential vacancy, that's a significant event.
They will appoint a president quickly, but candidly, the role of the president is really a facilitator. They don't have any more authority than any other commissioner, but they run the meetings.
So the mayor does not appoint the president.
That's correct.
So it's a rotating position.
It is. So every year, generally, it changes
Right.
to a new commissioner, and they rotate amongst themselves.
I think it's fair to say that you played a pretty significant role in the former president's demise. You were quite vocal.
Well, I looked into it very carefully. I thought it was a very significant step for the city to take, and I wanted to feel confident that it was the right thing to do because Mr. Fields did have a distinguished record in Long Beach. So I wanted to make sure we were doing the right thing.
And so in the end, the question became whether the travel was appropriate. I guess, did we learn something from this?
We learned a number of things from this, and I think that when you see City Auditor Laura Dowd's report in January, I'm confident that she's going to make some recommendations to the port on how to improve their best management practices.
His name is Gary DeLong. He is a member of the Long Beach City Council. My name is Brad Pomerance. You are watching Charter California Edition.
Good.
Welcome back. It's Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are joined by Dir.Noel Hacegaba. He is the Acting Deputy Executive Director of the beautiful Port of Long Beach. I thank you so much for joining us, sir. We just spoke with Gary DeLong. He's a member of the Long Beach City Council, and we discussed the changes that are going on with the Board of Port Commissioners. Tom Fields was removed. Is it Mr. Ceramic?
That's correct.
Yeah,
Nick Ceramic.
Nick Ceramic voluntarily resigned. His replacement was named. Mr. Fields' replacement has not been named as we speak today. That whole alphabet soup begs the question of how's it going with the Board of Port Commissioners?
Well, Brad, first of all, I want to thank you for having me
Sure.
here. It's always a pleasure to talk about the Port of Long Beach and the good work we're doing.
Right.
To answer your question, there have been some recent changes at the board level at the Port of Long Beach. But what's important to remember is that while the commission regroups, and that's something for the mayor and the city council to address,
Right.
the day-to-day operations of the port continues without disruption. We have a very competent management team and an excellent staff that is very capable of moving the port forward, even during this time of transition.
And what's also, one could say, a bit awkward is that while the board is going through a transition, when you look at management at the port, you have an acting executive director, an acting deputy executive director. I am looking at him. And so a lot of change going on at the Port of Long Beach.
That's correct, Brad. The good news is this. We have a board that is committed to moving the port forward. In fact, at our most recent board meeting, the Harbor Commission unanimously directed staff to initiate a search for a search firm to come in and assist the board in identifying the permanent executive director.
Right.
And we believe that once that individual is identified, it will start a process to bring more stability, more permanent stability. I believe that Al Morrow, who's our acting executive director, is doing an excellent job in leading the port.
And his predecessor moved on to greatness. Not that being the executive director of the port is not great, but what happened to his predecessor?
Chris Lido is, I believe, who you're referring
Yes.
to, and he left the Port of Long Beach to the Port of Oakland for
Right.
a similar job. He's now the executive director there.
But maybe then it was his predecessor who went to Washington, D.C. and joined like the Maritime Commission, or what am I thinking?
You're referring to Commissioner Mario Cordero,
Okay.
who is a former harbor commissioner
Okay.
and is now the chairman of the Federal Maritime Commission.
Okay, so clearly folks are
Yes.
doing well.
Yes.
You know, you
Yes.
start at the Long Beach Port. Not
Yes.
that that's not a good place to end your career, but there's been a
Yes.
lot of exciting moves for people affiliated with the Long
Yes,
Beach
that's,
Port.
that's correct.
At the same time, you talk about the Port of Oakland, then we think about the Port of Panama, we think about ports on the East Coast. There's a lot of competition for port traffic. And I want to get a sense, how fierce is that competition?
Brad, competition has always been fierce in this industry. Up north in Canada, for instance, we have Prince Rupert. For many years, it was a small, sleepy little port, and now is taking business, literally taking business from its neighbors across the border, primarily Seattle and Tacoma, some from the Southern California ports as
Right.
well. And then in Mexico, we have another port development underway
Right.
called Lázaro Cárdenas. And of course, there's a lot of speculation about the potential impacts of the widening of the Panama Canal, which is set to open in 2015.
But Long Beach is not taking it. I mean, Long Beach is fighting back in a very significant way. The competitive juices are flowing at the Port of Long Beach, and you have some projects online that are very exciting. Tell us about those.
Yes, we have a $4.5 billion capital improvement program. And basically what we're doing is we're modernizing our terminals. We're building new infrastructure that would allow the larger vessels that are online now to pass under our bridges, that will take advantage of the most technologically advanced terminals in North America, possibly the world. And as we invest $2.5 million a day, we
Wow.
have a capital budget of $788 million for this current fiscal year. So we're spending money fiercely for the sole purpose of maintaining our competitive advantage and retaining that in the decades to come.
What you described, is that part of the Middle Harbor project?
The Middle Harbor project is one of two major projects that are part of this $4.5 billion effort. There are others as well. But just to give you a sense, the Middle Harbor project, Bruce, when it's completed, will have a capacity of 3.1 million TEUs.
Which means?
Which means that if you compare that to other ports across the nation, it would rank by itself as the 4th largest port in America.
That's just Long Beach.
That would just be one terminal at the Port of Long Beach.
What about your twin, the Los Angeles port?
Well, they're also investing, I believe they're investing just under $2 billion.
But are they a competitor or are they a twin?
We compete for cargo.
You do?
We collaborate on issues such as the environment, such as security, issues of common concern that make sense for us as a complex to collaborate on. We collaborate very well.
Are you contiguous with the Los Angeles
We are
port?
contiguous.
Yeah, it's hard to realize that because you think Long Beach, Los Angeles, but you are right next to each other.
We are indeed.
And so it's a healthy competition, I guess.
It is. And as I said, we pride ourselves in collaborating with them. One
Right.
of the most important collaboratives that we've worked with the Port of Los Angeles on is what we call the Cleaner Action Plan.
Right, yes.
Back in 2006, both ports came together. We agreed that we needed to do something about the pollutions and the pollution impacts that both ports were having on the community. We came together as two ports, two entities, the two boards came together, and we developed the Cleaner Action Plan,
Right.
which has reduced pollution-related diesel emissions by 81% in only 5 years.
Right, I know I spoke with Mr. DeLong about that when we look at the plug-in program.
Yeah.
That being said, there still are some issues related to the environment that continue to cause a little dissension. We've heard, I use this expression, Asthma Alley in parts of West Long Beach. What's happening with the ports to really try to get a handle on this very question?
Well, Brad, it's an ongoing effort. We believe that as a port, we need to do whatever we can to mitigate the impacts of the port. Going back to Middle Harbor for a second.
Please.
That's going to more than double capacity when it's completed in 2019. But that terminal also is going to reduce emissions by 50%.
How does that work?
So
If you're
even-
doubling capacity, how are you reducing emissions?
Well, so even as we grow, we're already growing with the community in mind. And so the technology that we're instituting in these new developments are more efficient, they're greener, and they're more technologically advanced, which in essence allows us to grow while reducing emissions.
So it begs the question, talk to us about the job impacts of Long Beach and its port, because I know I've discussed this on this program, but I want everyone to hear how dramatic, how important, how critical the Long Beach port is to this regional economy.
It's extremely critical. There's no other economic engine like the port here in this region. 1 out of 8 jobs in Long Beach are generated by the port. Over 300,000 are in Southern California generated by the port. And across the nation, 1.5 million jobs. So there's no question that the Port of Long Beach is an economic engine.
And what about the twin ports?
Combined, they account for millions and millions of jobs throughout the nation.
So let me ask you, how can we get hired at the port? I mean, so many jobs, so much construction. I couldn't even imagine where to go if I wanted to become one of those folks who actually work at the port.
Well, we'll be happy to get the viewing audience in touch
Right.
with the right people.
Right.
If they visit our website at www.polb.com, we'll be happy to put them in touch with the right people.
So what else is coming online? You mentioned Middle Harbor. What else can we expect? I know the Desmond Bridge is going through construction, reconstruction, revitalization. What else can we expect to see?
We also have a variety of different rail projects. As you know, as the vessels are getting larger and larger,
Right.
The impacts those are having on the landside terminal and infrastructure is pretty great. So in order to move the additional cargo that is coming with these bigger vessels, we need to have sufficient rail. So we have a variety of different rail projects underway currently, and some other ones that are planned for the future that will also enhance our efficiency.
And when you look towards those rail projects, are you also going to consider traffic impacts? Because again, we love seeing those railroad cars go down because that means more jobs, but at the same time, they can be disruptive.
That's correct. And so the way we look at it is if we can enhance our rail capabilities and create efficiencies that way, some of that rail efficiency may take some of the trucks off the roads.
I see. Okay, I want to thank you so much for joining us. His name is Noel Hacegaba. He is the acting Deputy Executive Director of the Port of Long Beach. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition.